All right. Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone. This is Adam Rogers. We're here with Dispersing the Fog. This is May the 4th, 2025. And this is episode 10. Paul, we've made it to double digits. How about that?
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
All
no,
our hard work, and here we are together, but far apart.
we probably are as far apart just about as you can be, but yet still be on planet Earth. I'm in Nova Scotia, and you are in Raratonga in the
I'm
South
on the
Pacific.
east coast of Raratonga and the Cook Islands. And to understand the geography, Raratonga is about halfway between Hawaii and New Zealand. Same sort of latitude as Hawaii, but south of the equator, 21 degrees south. And on the east coast of Raratonga, to get to the west coast is about 16 minutes one way and 18 minutes the other way to get to the same spot on the east coast. And that's going through the north or south coast. So you get an idea of how small it is at 50 kilometers an hour, 30 in the school zones. So it takes 34 minutes to drive right around the island
Well,
if you obey the speed limits.
there's a lot of information there, Paul. First of all, they have speed limits. They have a school. That's a good
They
thing.
have lots of schools,
Yeah.
no stoplights. Some say Rarotonga is like Hawaii was 50 years ago.
Okay.
No
Yeah.
buildings allowed, no building can be higher than a coconut tree. It's
That's
very
good.
old school, very religious. It's Sunday, everything is closed.
Things probably go at a fairly comfortable pace there, I would think. No, the speed limit may not be necessary. I'm sure everybody's poking around.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I arrived here last week with COVID that I picked up, I guess, in Hawaii or in the 20 hours of flying it took to get here. But I had the vaccination, so the COVID, although it was bad, it was like I lost my sense of taste and smell, but it only lasted 2.5, 3 days, and then poof, it was gone. So,
Well, that's good. The benefits of the vaccination, I guess we don't want to jump
well,
into that.
Sharon never got it. Sharon never got it. So
She never got COVID or the vaccine. Or
she
the
had the vaccine and
oh,
she never got it, and then so I got it, and I was with her the whole time. And when I tested for it here, I had it, and then 3 days later, it was gone. I knew it was gone, but
well, Paul, you did the patriotic thing. I know you went through the United States because you kind of have to go through Hawaii, which still counts as the United States. But you went on a Canadian airline, thinking that was the right thing to do, and I agree with you. But that's maybe where you got COVID.
well, I took Air Canada through Vancouver to Hawaii. We took Hawaiian Air, which flies once a week to Raro. And going home to avoid any red eye flights, we're going through Tahiti, which is 2.5 hour flight to the east of here, the northeast. And then we're flying French B to San Francisco, Porter, a Canadian airline from San Francisco to Toronto, and then back home. So we're avoiding all the American airlines and making a statement as best we can.
Well, that's good, and the red shirt helps too. Paul, is this not the second time that you've had a COVID experience in Hawaii? Am I remembering that right?
That's right. I got it. I got it a couple of years ago. I got it coming from Hawaii to Vancouver, and this time I got it somewhere in that same coming the other direction. So,
Well, still, I think in the top five places on Earth, Hawaii. So we can't be too mad at Hawaii, even if you get COVID there.
well, with our daughter living in the South Pacific, they've lived in Fiji. She lived in Malaysia for a while. We've been to Tahiti, Hawaii. We have to go to get here, and I'll tell you, I like Raratonga the best of them all. I've come to appreciate it over Tahiti and other places just for its laid back, old school sort of relaxation. It's nice.
It's a little bit of a change of pace for a guy like you that's used to go, go, go. You're always up to something and talking to people. Well, I guess you can still do that there, but have you found that you're in vacation mode? Is this Paul Palango vacation mode?
This is vacation mode. In fact, here's a little insight. The other night we had the largest cockroach I've ever seen in my life
All
in
right.
our bedroom. And Sharon was at the point where I can't sleep in here. And I said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. The cockroach isn't going to kill you. And we finally went to sleep because I tried to catch the thing, and they're like smart and elusive. It was hiding behind a pillar from the luggage rack, and then when I went to get it, it ran under a dresser. Then I moved the dresser, and it was gone somewhere else, and I couldn't catch up with it. So I finally went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Sharon says she was awoken by a crunching sound, and thinking that it was the cockroach doing something. And it turned out, no, we had another friend in the room, a wall gecko.
Okay.
And the wall gecko, a lizard, was a good sized one, ate the cockroach.
Hey, all right.
So there you are. It's
Nature
like,
looks after
yeah.
the visitors.
So people go, oh, I got a gecko in my room. That's a good thing. I'm telling you right now, the gecko on the wall isn't going to eat you, but it's going to eat the spiders, the cockroaches, and everything else.
Everything else that's keeping you awake.
That's right.
Well, Paul, you're relaxing there and it's quiet, but it has certainly been anything but a quiet week up here in the north in Canada. So we had the federal election last Monday, and it seems like a while ago now, but it's less than a week ago that we had a federal election with lots of changes across the country. Really interesting election. So we'll talk about that and some of the fallout or the aftermath, some of the results of that, some of which are relevant. And then just like in the days leading up to the election, just beforehand, there was this tragedy out in Vancouver at the Filipino festival, the Lapu Lapu Festival that they were having their street festival with 11 people killed, many more, a couple of dozen more injured by this mentally ill individual that drove a vehicle, an Audi SUV, into a crowd there in Vancouver. So we'll talk about that. There's already been calls for an inquiry into the events and to the individual that was involved. There was today, actually, as we speak and as we're recording this, this is it's about 5:30 local time here in Nova Scotia. There is an Amber Alert. There's been some emergency alerts issued over two missing children. Lots of reaction to this, and this may be a sense of what's going on in Nova Scotia with after the Portapic situation. I mean, the emergency alerts, they didn't go early enough. There wasn't an Amber Alert issued right away, so we'll talk about that. The children have still not been found. And this week has featured a jury trial in London, Ontario, featuring five members of the 2018 world champion Canadian junior hockey club. And so that trial is underway. There's been some high profile witnesses. There was a mistrial declared right away, a new jury. And so we'll talk about that. And if we have time, there was a big article by Aaron Beswick this week in the National Post. Aaron Beswick, a local reporter here in Nova Scotia, just won a National Journalism Award on the Elver fishery and the indigenous fishery and the tensions involved in some of that. So lots of stuff to get to. I think it probably makes sense to start with the election and some of the fallout from that. So we know the results. The Liberals under Mark Carney won a minority government at 169 seats. They needed 172 for majority to win a majority, so they were just shy of that. Lots of things happened. So the Liberals came from way back under Justin Trudeau. They were 25 points down to with a new leader winning under Mark Carney. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, lost his own seat in the Ottawa area, but grew the vote for the Conservatives to the highest level they've had since the 1980s. So lots to get into with the election. What do you see as sort of some of the headlines from this, Paul?
Well, I'm in the South Pacific now, and the election just happened here in Australia, where the same thing happened as happened in Canada, where the government, which was under attack from right wing sort of populists, um, came back and won the election decisively, sort of a vote against Trump. So the same thing is happening here as there. Many of the issues are the same in Australia and Canada, but the issue that attracts me and you to this is the justice system and how little, there was a little bit of discussion about justice and policing in the election more than in previous elections, but not a lot, and not a lot substantive. But I think crime and the justice system drove this election in many ways, and will continue to resonate in the future.
There was a suggestion, and there's been okay, so a lot of people in the lead up to the election, analysts were thinking that the Ontario vote, particularly the 905 and Southwestern Ontario, was going to effectively decide the outcome between the Conservatives and the Liberals. And it was very close. But a lot of those seats, now it ended up actually being that Quebec and the maybe the threat of a Polyev government or the concern over that led to a lot of Liberal seats in Quebec. But the Southwestern Ontario vote really went to the Conservatives, and it might have been an opportunity lost for the Liberal Party there because one would argue, I think, Paul, that the Liberal Party under Mark Carney didn't really focus on justice issues very much, maybe to their detriment in that area.
Well, nobody, the conservatives like to say they're the party of law and order, but historically, if you look at this, you look at it historically, the conservatives have done very little to improve the justice system because it's anathema to them to do structural change, which needs to happen, that we need structural change in the way policing and the justice system delivers its products, as it were. But in the conservatives historically don't do anything, but they don't want to tamper with the system in any meaningful way. I mean, Stephen Harper came to power saying he was going to get the RCMP out of contract policing in the provinces outside of Ontario and Quebec. Once he got into power, he forgot that. The NDP is, which was slaughtered in the election, is fundamentally incapable of dealing with change in the justice system, other than making it easier on offenders. Everyone's a victim sort of politics. And the Liberals, oddly enough, are the only ones who have been moving in that direction. Appearing, behind the scenes, not really proclaiming it loudly, but working behind the scenes to do change to the justice system, create a better federal policing structure, et cetera. So oddly enough, the Liberals are the only hope we have for structural change to improve the justice system, even though they've caused many of the problems at the same time. So
They don't have a
that's the
great,
as I
yeah,
see it.
they don't have a great record in terms of the gun portfolio in a sense, right? They had the long gun registry, which was hugely unpopular. These buyback programs, which don't seem to have been terribly effective. But during the one thing that actually two things. One was Justin Trudeau on his way out the door did put out this white paper on RCMP reform, which you never know. I mean, if it works, that is in line with the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations out of the Portapic shootings. The other one is that Mark Carney talked about cross-border gun smuggling and trying to stop that as anyway, part of a border package, I guess, a border security package is dealing with the illegal guns that come across. So again, that was recommended as a thing out of the Mass Casualty Commission. Now, whether they follow through on it and do anything proper is yet to be determined. But yeah,
Well,
it was interesting, wasn't it?
you think, Carney, there's an opportunity here for Carney in the name of Canadian unity to sort of unite Canadians by taking the RCMP out of provincial policing in Alberta and saying to Alberta, you can have your own provincial police as a sort of a gift to them, showing we're all going to work together here. And so, in the name of Canadian unity, start to make these structural changes that are needed. I could see that being a politically opportunistic way to go about things.
Well, one of the things that Mark Carney is going to need to do is think about Canadian unity, not in the traditional sense of worrying about Quebec, but of worrying about Alberta and Saskatchewan. I see Premier Scott Moe of Saskatchewan was asked today because there's a movement afoot in Saskatchewan to have a referendum on whether to remain part of Canada, which seems incredible. But the more incredible part was the Premier was asked which way he's going to vote, and he wouldn't answer. He wouldn't say, "Yeah, of course, going to stay within Canada." So, those provinces need something from the federal government. And this, the freedom to start their own police force or the encouragement and the funding to help out with doing so, I think might be one of those things.
Well, doing that and basically opening up trade among all the provinces, shipping the oil from the west to the east coast, and creating export opportunities there, as well as uh, domestic consumption of our own oil. You think that would all make sense in a modern country, and that's ways to unite the country right there.
Yeah, and the pipeline within Canada of for energy going across the country, that's finally even started to be, people in
Mhm.
Quebec, politicians in Quebec. I know there's a liberal leadership race underway there now provincially. Apparently, they were talking about pipelines in their debates. Certainly, the premier of Quebec, Legault, was more open to pipelines during the federal election campaign than he'd ever been in the last few years when he's been asked. So, those kinds of things which seemed like impossible from a national infrastructure perspective, even 6 months ago, are now seeming like they might have the social license and the political will to make happen.
Well, isn't it interesting though that Donald Trump, by saying he wanted to make Canada the 51st state, sort of flushed out Quebec independent separatists who play this game? We want to separate, we want to separate, we want to be our own country, and extract all kinds of things from the Canadian Federation, which allows them to stay in. It's basically Donald Trump negotiating the style, the negotiating style, the same thing.
Yeah,
Ask for the world and take whatever you can get. And then Donald Trump says we're going to make Canada the 51st state, and suddenly the separatists are Canadians.
yeah, yeah,
Like, whoa, 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 we don't want that. We don't want that because then we're going to become Louisiana. Yeah, it's French in name, but it's part of the United States.
yeah. There was, yeah, there was a big shift in the attitudes. I mean, that was really what drove a lot of the campaign and the results. I mean, the Conservatives were up 25 points just a few months ago when the discussion was all about Justin Trudeau and cost of living. And then Trump comes in, Trudeau's out, Carney gets rid of the carbon tax, and it just completely shifted. And the Conservatives and Polyev in particular couldn't adjust to that. And the people that I've been hearing from that you're like, okay, got to get rid of Trudeau. Not so crazy about this other guy, but he's a lot better than Trudeau, so sure. All of a sudden realized, actually, we're not that crazy about Polyev either, especially in Quebec. They really seem to turn away from him just on a personal level. And then he loses
Oh,
one
but
seat.
but Adam, Conrad Black, convicted felon in the United States, pardoned by Donald Trump for whatever reason, believes Polyev is still the man of the future for Canada.
Oh,
So
yeah.
come on, let's step in line there and get behind, rally behind him, because Conrad Black sees something in Pierre Polyev that most Canadians don't see. I'm not sure what it is, but let's rally behind him. I am being a little sarcastic.
No, just a little bit. Well, you know what happened, of course. And then at the end of the election campaign, there's how in the United States, when you hear about politician X, they're going to New Hampshire. Oh, they're going to do a fishing trip in New Hampshire. Oh, they're going to make a speech in Iowa, the first few states that vote in the primaries. The Canadian equivalent of that is as soon as you hear, oh, so and so is taking French lessons. Well, guess who revealed that they're taking French lessons is Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston. So that backed up by also progressive conservative Premier Doug Ford, who were both making some comments towards the end of the campaign. Premier Houston put out a very slick, well-received campaign style video. So, the progressive element of the Conservative Party might be looking to make a comeback and put somebody back in the leadership, put somebody in the leadership of the Conservative Party that's more from the progressive wing, more palatable to, centrist Canadians, East Coasters, you know, undecided independents, and not the hardcore conservative that Pierre Poilievre has been and will continue to be.
Couldn't agree more.
So we'll see what happens with all that. So anyway, the conservatives made lots of mistakes, but Carney came in the man of the hour as well, and anyway, so we'll see what happens. He has a cabinet to name. He's going to go see the president on Tuesday. He's got the G7 coming up. Lots of things to happen in the next little while here. Speech from the throne, and King Charles III is coming to deliver the speech from the throne. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's got American populace all excited.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to confirm, I guess, reaffirm that we're not, that we're a British colony. We're not going to be taken over by the Americans. By the way, is Raratonga is that part of the Commonwealth?
Yep.
You know this? Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a protectorate of New Zealand, but it has, for 18,000 people, whatever live here, it has a vote in the UN. So it's equal to Canada. So you have the Chinese and others always trying to court its vote, and New Zealand trying to protect it. And, Cook Islands wanted to get their own passports, been lobbying to have their own passports, and New Zealand said, no, you can't do that. So it's like,
Don't want to get too many independent thoughts.
yeah,
Well,
don't get too independent. Don't start, don't. Yeah, I mean, the other thing going on here that applies to Canada and elsewhere. Yesterday, I saw a deep ocean sort of dredger. So they're getting ready to start dredging the deep ocean, which Donald Trump really wants to do for valuable minerals and things like that around here. And they see that as the future for their economy. Although a lot of people are saying, no, this is a really bad idea. And there's not a lot of thought going into it, it seems. Just it's all about the money.
just to close off the election talk, I see you mentioned the Australian election, and there's some similarities there in that the conservative candidate there, the leader, apparently also lost his seat.
Yep.
And so Trump is having he's losing elections in multiple countries.
But not in the one that counts, although he's
No,
way down.
no. So anyway, so we'll keep an eye on all that stuff, and we'll keep an eye and see what the new government does, if anything, differently on these justice issues. So let's move on to, I mean, this is not unrelated because it has justice issues and political issues tied in with it. This is the Lapu Lapu Festival tragedy in Vancouver. Just before, and in fact, at the festival, Premier Eby had been there. Jagmeet Singh from the NDP, the former now leader of the NDP, had been there just an hour prior to the tragic event. So this was as 11 people is confirmed have been killed. Kaiji Adam Low, I think the Adam is probably an addition to his name, from uh, uh, from Thailand originally, I think.
Taiwan.
Taiwan, sorry, originally, and 30 years old. He was on leave from a treatment facility, mental health treatment facility, had no criminal record, but police have identified that he had a significant number of quote unquote interactions with police, not really described at this point, but a few dozen, including the day before the tragic events. And so this was a known individual. And premier has already called for an inquiry, sort of. We'll talk about what exactly he means by that. What are your initial thoughts on this one, Paul? You followed that story right away.
Yeah, I mean, this fellow obviously had mental issues. His brother was murdered the previous year. His brother was the first murder of the year, I think in 2024,
Yeah,
2023. I
January
can't remember one of
2024.
those. Here in Vancouver, he was murdered by an Indigenous guy who was charged. and I'm not sure where that has all ended up. His father died somewhere in the recent years. And on his Facebook, I immediately went to his Facebook. Very helpful tool for finding out about people because people put out their lives out there, and you could see the sort of eerie, sort of almost revelations type uh, artwork there about his missing father and his dead father and his dead brother in heaven, and signs of the paranoid schizophrenic sort of problems he was having. He was calling the police repeatedly about break-ins at his house, paranoia. Now, should have been locked up, but had been locked up in the past. But we live in an age where personal freedoms have a higher standing than sort of the protection of the public. And he's out on the streets, shouldn't have been on the streets, but governments and the public behind them generally support the notion that people shouldn't be locked up. It's outrageous, give them a chance. Well, this is what happens when you don't make tough decisions. As a society, we have to make tough decisions about some people, and personal freedoms don't enter into it. I mean, the protection of the public enters into it, and now a lot of people lost their lives. Others have been damaged forever because of it. But that the cult of personal freedoms won another victory.
There seems to be a real. I want to talk a little bit about the political context here because it relates to that. And I'm so okay. So first of all, the Premier of British Columbia is David Eby, former classmate of mine. He was introduced himself as an activist when we were starting law school together, and has maintained that. He was the head of the BC Civil Liberties Association when he got back to British Columbia after school for a while. But he seems to be on the side of, of protecting the public at this point. So that's an interesting, for him in particular to be on this side. So here's what seems to be happening. He's talking about they're trying to modernize, is his language, the BC Mental Health Act. But there's been a problem because there's litigation ongoing now with there was two individuals who were institutionalized, and there was a legal challenge as to whether the government could institutionalize these individuals, and their freedom was at stake and all this stuff. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, just on a narrower issue as to because the two individuals dropped out of the case, but I think the BC Civil Liberties Association kept it going, or the organization that was promoting it kept it going. So there's a legal challenge now to whether individuals can be institutionalized and involuntarily done so. And so the premier is a little hesitant to put in to change the legislation while that legal challenge is ongoing, but I think now he's inclined to do so. And he has also called for a public inquiry into this instance, but only if the public is unsatisfied by the criminal trial, the criminal outcome of this. Now, there's a few problems with that. The biggest problem with that is that the criminal trial might not be over for a year or two. And then what? Are you going to call an inquiry after that? I mean, where, he talks on the one hand about wanting to do things quickly, but if you're waiting for one process to finish before you think about an inquiry, that's not going to be quickly. It's just impossible.
Well, Eby, he's an NDP premier. He, has a socialist label, but he is actively tried to do things to make structural change. I mean, he is the guy who essentially laid down the law and had the RCMP lose their largest detachment in Surrey. He took on the city council. He was essentially the godfather of the creation of the Surrey police force, much to the chagrin of the RCMP. And he stood his ground and withstood the threats, etc. I admire him for doing that. I think he is trying to do things to get the system to work better. But we talked about this before. The problem is that governments don't want to do the hard work anymore. They let's do whatever we can to get to the next election. And changing the Mental Health Act is going to require, consensus and hard work by the government to create new laws. Much like, we need law reform in Canada, but government isn't doing it because it's too hard to do. It's all about the next election and leaving it up to the courts. And now we're in this box because that attitude has prevailed for the last 30 or 40 years. And we need to get out of it. Somebody has to, we have to get tough. Maybe, Carney and guys like Eby are the ones who are going to do it. Remains to see if Carney can basically marshal those forces, but it would be nice if he could and sort of help everyone and reform the laws, reform the legislation so it reflects what we need as a society. Not some jackboot right wing thing or some crazy left wing thing, but something that makes sense, right down the middle, that serves all the interests, not just particular interests.
These institutions are so important for mental health. I mean, it's become such, I mean, it's becoming a bigger issue since the pandemic, but it's become a bigger issue over the last few decades anyway. But I think there's a couple of things going on. One is, I think there's a reticence in Canadian society against institutions themselves. You think of the bad experiences that Canadians have had with institutions like, you know, the the day schools, the residential schools, any kind of these, youth reformatories and jails. There have been abuse, sexual, physical abuse in all of these institutions. There have been lawsuits, over the last few decades, class action lawsuits over almost all of these institutions. And I wonder if there's just sort of like, okay, we just can't do these. We can't seem to run these institutions without them being rife with abuse. So is that part of the hesitation to do it? Because it seems like the answer is to, well, all right, house these people in a secure but reform and growth oriented, help oriented situation. And that seems to be the only way that we might help some of these people and keep society safe.
Or is it just setting up institutions and making those who run the institutions held properly accountable in real time?
Yeah,
That in the past, nobody was held accountable. The institutions got rotten, and instead of fixing the problem, we killed the institutions and made another problem.
that's right. Yeah. And the lawsuits are always, decades later and well beyond the time when they would actually help. Yeah, so more accountability on the front end, but the institutions themselves, and I think you know, involuntary institutionalization is an important tool and something that needs to be in there. I mean, you see these people in court, and if they're not getting help, they just can't be let out because they're unpredictable. Look at this guy. I mean, he had his home. He was worried about keeping his home. His home was worth $2.15 million. He and his mother were living there. I don't think either one of them were working. The vehicle he drove in was an Audi SUV. Like it wasn't like they had nothing. He wasn't a poor man living on the street. Uh, so, but mental health
Financial
can hit anybody. Yeah,
financial anorexia.
yeah.
You've heard the term? It's
I don't
financial
think so.
anorexia. It's people who have all kinds of assets and think they're poor and act like they're poor.
Yeah,
And they shop at dollar stores and Walmart and whatever, and they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in assets, but they act like they're just basically in the middle of the depression. It's financial anorexia. It's well described, and it's part of part of the problems we have today with people who, there's a difference between being cheap and poor. Cheap is basically a mental issue. Poor is actually you really have problems.
guy could have sold his house. Him and his mother put $1 million in their pocket and got a smaller house. I mean, it wouldn't
That's
have
right.
been, it's not that complicated. Uh, some weird moments there. Okay, so he initially attempted to flee. Apparently, he was detained by bystanders. Some people started to attack him, and he was protected from mob justice, I guess, initially. He put his hand on his head and said, "I'm sorry." Like, what is that supposed to mean? I have no idea. Uh, so so we'll see. I mean, so the criminal trial will be the first thing to happen, it would seem. And if he pleads, well, he'll probably plead not criminally responsible, try to make that claim. Well, if he's found not criminally responsible, then that's sort of an indefinite sentence. He will be held in an institution until he can prove that he's safe, if that's accepted. Now that's it's not a simple matter, and there'll be lots of analysis. Now he had a mental health team, and the team apparently he was out on leave, and so there should be plenty of analysis for people to, draw upon prior to the tragedy. So I don't like his chances of being found not criminally responsible if he had an active mental health team who allowed him out.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so Paul, let's move on to let's maybe we'll talk a little bit about the Amber Alert that was taking place here in Nova Scotia today, and then we'll move over to the World Junior Hockey trial that was taking place this week because there's lots going on there. Amber Alert today in Nova Scotia. I got two emergency alerts on my phone. I live a solid hour and a half away from where this takes place, where the two children were missing. Wandered away. The mother or caregiver, I think mother, thought they were in the house. They were out in the yard. Apparently, she went back to sleep. Kids aren't the kind of kids that would just get up and wander off, she said. But then they were gone. And lots of search and rescue people involved, at least 100, according to news reports, but no Amber Alert. Now, do you think that's an important thing to have done? A failure on the part of the police, given what we know so far? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, there's something not right here about what the RCMP was doing and not doing. And I've had a number of comments about it, but one of them is from a former RCMP officer named Dave Moore, who is on the outs with the RCMP. And being on the outs with the RCMP doesn't mean you're a bad guy necessarily. It often means you're a good guy and the RCMP doesn't like what you have to say. And Dave Moore has an interesting history. He now lives in Florida, but he was also one of the creators, as I understand it, of the Amber Alert program in Nova Scotia. And Dave wrote me a number of things in the last couple of days saying, and I'll read you exactly what he wrote.
Sure.
This is 36 hours after the children went missing. So you have to ask yourself what possible reason the RCMP might have to not call a full Amber Alert on the two missing children in Pictou. WTF. You know what that means.
Yeah.
NS taxpayers spent $54 million implementing the Nova Scotia Amber Alert program to have it shelved in times of need. Friday at 10 a.m., the children were reported missing, and at the same time, the Amber Alert should have been launched. Why wasn't it? The point of the program was to take discretion away from police officers and release the information as a matter of policy. Every hour going missing, the scope of search expands by 100 kilometers. At this point, 36 hours later, 3,600 kilometers could have been traveled. Wrong, wrong, wrong on so many levels. Last point. I wrote the program back in 2001, and there's no excuse for it not releasing the information, including what they were wearing when last seen. And he goes on and on and on about they put out like a soft alert. They called it a soft alert or a voluntary alert. WTF is that? God help these morons if it turns out to be an abduction.
So,
So this is a guy who wrote the program, and I could go on reading what he wrote me, but this is a typical problem of the RCMP. I mean, they don't know how to react, or there's something else. And we talked about this before. Is there something else going on they don't want to talk about? Was there some sort of operation? Was someone involved in this who they're trying to protect? Is there something very sensitive about this issue? Or are they just lazy, understaffed, and incompetent? But that's the only two things I can see.
one of the things I wondered about, okay, so first of all, I think they put out a description of what the boots, the rubber boots that they thought the two kids were wearing. Maybe they just didn't know what else they might be wearing that morning if they got up out of bed and still had their pajamas on. I think they're 6 and 4 years old.
But Adam, the first thing
Yeah.
they didn't even report their names.
No, that's right.
They said, the first reports were there's two children missing, didn't report their names, anything else about them, any identifiers whatsoever. So, what is the issue? What's the problem? What sort of fake privacy issue are you hiding behind here, and why are you doing it?
You think they being the police assumed that they must be just in the woods. They can't have been taken. How could that have happened, right? Because you think, all right, children leave their home in the morning and wander around a little bit. Well, it's like if you drop your wallet in the parking lot. It's unlikely that the first person to pick it up is a thief. They're most likely just a regular citizen and they're going to pick up your wallet and try to help whoever owns it. Same with most likely, if children sort of wander out in the streets, the first person they're going to want to run into is not going to be an abductor, but rather a helpful neighbor, and that will help them out and try to, you know. So did the police just assume that that would be the case? That they'll run into somebody friendly, or else there must be in the woods nearby, and so no point putting out an Amber Alert. Um, why bother everybody and worry people for no reason?
Well,
Would that be the mindset?
I looked on the map where this they went missing. I mean, there are two creeks. The headwaters of the Stewiacke River are right there. Um, did they, as young children often do, stumble into the water? One tried to help the other, and they were washed away. That's a possibility. I mean, several years ago, 4 years ago, Dylan Ealer, 3-year-old, disappeared 20 miles, 20 kilometers away from there to the south in Truro.
Yeah.
It still has not been found. What happened to him? Is there, are the kids stumbling into the water, or is there a killer loose or abductors loose? I mean, there's the other thing about that area just south of New Glasgow. So surprisingly, for a rural community, lots of crime in that area. There's drug problems, meth problems in those communities. There's lots going on, and you have an under-equipped police force in the RCMP patrolling those areas.
Well, just for as a rough guide to that, Paul, I know New Glasgow, Pictou is more populated than Antigonish, Guysborough, but I go to court regularly in both. And the Antigonish docket, weekly docket, is usually a page long. The Pictou docket is usually 4 or 5 pages long. So that says something, I think, about what's happening in both areas. So, well, I know lots of people will be tracking this. We're Sunday evening here now, a couple of days in, and children have not been found. So there's already been certainly lots of criticism online about the lack of an Amber Alert. I'm sure that's partly why those two emergency alerts went out today. Maybe too little, too late.
You would think, after the mass casualty in Nova Scotia 5 years ago, there would be the RCMP, the Nova Scotia government has given the RCMP every opportunity and financing to improve, and nothing has happened. Nothing whatsoever. The government still fully supports the RCMP in its role as a provincial contract police force. What's it going to take for the government, for some politician to get up on their hind legs and ask a question about this? I understand Ian Rankin, the former Liberal leader was on the radio recently or last week asking a question about policing and stuff. Yay, the first politician I've seen that's asked any questions about this.
Yeah, it's been rare. There hasn't been a lot of follow up on the recommendations at all, as we covered with Scott McLeod a couple of weeks ago, the fifth anniversary. So maybe this will prompt some more questions at least, and it's certainly bringing it back to the front page and the front of people's mind.
It's sad. I hope the best for those two children, but the longer it goes on, the more dire the situation seems to be.
Yeah. Rough around Nova Scotia, there's been a few of those situations of missing children here, and really affects an entire community, entire province, really, when that happens. All right. Okay, so Paul, the next story I want to talk about and bring in is this the World Junior Hockey Players trial that's going on now in London, Ontario. So it had an unusual start. And it started off, it's a jury trial. So that's an interesting decision on the part of the five accused. And the five accused all had NHL experience. They were part of the 2018 World Junior Hockey Champion team. Michael McLeod, Dylan Dubé, Carter Hart, Cal Foote, and Alex Formenton. Carter Hart, being an all-star goalie, was in line potentially to play for the senior team Canada. That's all gone. Cal Foote, son of NHL All-Star Team Canada guy Adam Foote, a great defenseman for Colorado and Canada. So, so they started the sexual assault trial last week. Actually, it started the week before with a jury selection, and then they got to opening statements from the Crown, and then they started with the first witness, the lead investigator. And very early on in that testimony, a mistrial was declared by the judge, and they got rid of the jury and they brought in a new jury just a couple of days later. So that was an unusual start. None of the reporting is allowed to tell us what the reason was for the mistrial. I thought initially that it might have been something in the opening remarks from the Crown. Delicate area. This, anytime you're dealing with a sexual assault allegation, it is, full of landmines for the lawyers, for the judges. It's a much more complicated area of law than one might think. Dealing with consent, dealing with trying to avoid any reference to, myths of sexual assault and rape myths. It's a difficult area to negotiate and tread, and so I thought maybe something, maybe the Crown prosecutor said something improper about consent, and that got in the jury's mind, and defense raised it. I don't know. We'll find out after the trial why that was. But since then, we've had a week's worth of testimony. We've started hearing on Friday. We heard from the complainant, who's referred to by her initials EM. We heard this week from Boris Kachuk, who was on the team as well. He's now in the AHL with the Pittsburgh Penguins affiliate. We've heard from Taylor Radish, who was, as he testified, in the middle of a playoff series. He plays for Washington against Montreal, and he was testifying remotely. So, and they're all testifying because there was a group chat, and they testified about what was in the group chat, some invitations to come over to a hotel room. So tricky case. There's lots more. I can set up more of the case and talk about what happened this week. You've been following this one closely, Paul?
Yes, I have been following it.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of the issue in a case like this, especially one that sort of has a historical context, sometime later, the complainant steps forward and makes the complaint. And the issue in this case obviously revolves around the videotapes of the complainant at the time, prior to, during, and after the alleged assaults, saying that she gave her consent and was okay with it.
Yeah.
And she had no problem. I think at one point she says into the camera, "You guys are being paranoid." I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I'm not making anything up there. I mean, that's what she said. That's so you as a lawyer, how do you deal with that on either side, as defense or prosecutor? It seems you have a tough job as a prosecutor prosecuting this case when the female says she did this. And the last point is, over the course of my life, I've come across women who have been involved in either been gang raped um, or consensually had sex with multiple partners. In fact, one woman I'm aware of bragged about taking on a whole soccer team in London because very similar to this situation,
Yeah.
and she willingly did it. Others I know had been, at a party either as, with one person and a whole bunch of other men got involved. And I've seen this, it's a horrible situation. Where does consent come in those situations, you know?
Tricky.
Um,
So consent is tricky. You can you can withdraw your consent before, of course. You can not give your consent. You can withdraw your consent during the activity at any point, and you can stop consenting to whatever's taking place. But what you can't do is withdraw your consent after the fact. And so that's the dilemma here. Because, okay, so there was two short videos, both on Michael McLeod's phone. Michael McLeod is the, I guess, main accused. So she testifies that she had consensual sex with Michael McLeod. Then he invited others over to the room, and there was further sexual activity. Well, two videos. One's at 3:25 a.m. and she just says, "Yeah, I'm okay." It's a very short video. At 4:26 a.m., she says, "It was all consensual. Are you recording me? Okay, good. You are so paranoid. Holy, I enjoyed it. It was fine. I'm so sober. That's why I can't do this right now." So anyway, I'm not the last little line there, I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but the part, "You guys are so paranoid, holy," like the way she's expressing that. So that's at 4:26. There's video of her leaving the hotel lobby at 4:47. So 21 minutes later. So apparently in the 4:26 video, she's just wearing a towel. 4:47, 21 minutes later, she's out the door in the hotel. So of course, if anything happened after that in the 21 minutes, then that's beyond what she's saying in the video that she's consented to. The other question is, was that consent coerced? Was it genuine? That's what I think the Crown's going to try to argue, is that she wasn't in a position to give consent. But that's tricky too. I mean, she was sober enough to give the consent at the time. Then what else can you go by?
I covered, I've talked about this before. I covered the Toronto Blue Jays in their inaugural season. So I traveled around with the team. Went to 200 games that year. Um, uh, Partied with the teams. Went out, drinking and restaurants or whatever. And I saw what was going on, like women basically throwing themselves at players, knocking on their doors in the middle of the night, calling them up from the hotel lobby, and going to meet them. I mean, there's something in that world, obviously, where it's a lot of easy sex going on and it's readily available to the point where modern players basically use escorts, can afford it too. They use escorts or prostitutes because it's safer. Enough of these cases have happened where women, for one reason or another, have gone after professional players seeking money, seeking some sort of redress because it's there. So this complicates the facts. And I said it's not. I'm not making it up. It's real. You could read about it, and if you had the opportunity, like I have, to travel and see it firsthand, it's a real problem. It's a real issue. But not all women are innocent victims in this.
No,
So
and Boy, been on lots of teams and lots of trips. You know, groups uh, groups of guys they don't tend to put up with non-consensual anything, right? Like it's with among their teammates, right? If you hear stuff like that, like that's not cool. Nobody wants that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly my experience. That I thought I've never been in a situation where somebody says, "Let's do that." Let's
Yeah.
get this. Like never. Nobody would say, "No, no, no, you're not doing that. That's not going to happen." And I've never even had to say that's not going to happen. It's never come up.
Now, this all kind of the setting of this is relevant too because it was right in the midst or the height of the Me Too stuff when these complaints came out. So that adds a context to it, which doesn't seem like it weighs in favor of the complainant. And there's a real energy around this too to put the whole hockey system and the hockey world on trial too as part of this to make it into a bigger thing. And I see even in the CBC article that was doing a deep dive into the issue of the film, the videos, and what relevance they might have. They had these so-called experts, and none of them had seen the video. They were all talking about what the video, well, could it mean anything? Well, it all depends on the context. Yeah, well, no kidding, it does. But none of them discussed the context or even, anyway. So there's a lot of people with agendas that are getting involved in this discussion too, and I don't think that's helpful, other than
Well,
us.
I think
We
as
don't
I
have an
said,
agenda.
yeah, you have to have context. I mean, to paraphrase what the victim said on the video, did she have sober second thought about what happened? She said, I have to, essentially my reading is that I have to be drunk to do that. And I'm not drunk right now, so I can't do it anymore. That seems to be what she said. So that seems consciousness. That shows her consciousness. She, even being drunk, she knew that she had to be drunk to do it.
Yeah,
Like the context of what she seems to be saying there, I think is very relevant in determining the guilt or innocence of the parties involved. Was it consensual or not consensual? Well, she says by her own words, I consented, but I needed this to make my consent.
I think
Well,
that
who
yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why the players probably went with a jury rather than judge alone to put this in front of a jury and say, well, you got these five NHL hockey players, and you know, a lot of people at the bar were probably looking their way and hoping to talk to them or hoping to dance with them, and this girl did. I don't know. Like, I think a jury is going to have a hard time looking past that video of her, expressing. And it doesn't sound like it was like one of these hostage videos, right? Of read these lines. It would seem to be her saying what she wanted to say.
Yep.
So I think they probably made the right choice. The lawyers gave the right advice there, but it's affected things, like I know, like even Drake Batherson, Nova Scotia hockey player for the Senators, he was on the team. He was one of the proposed witnesses. Like he had a terrible series against the Maple Leafs. Like he wasn't called to testify, but this must be affecting these players. Like they're all the five players that are at the in the center of it. I mean, none of them are in the NHL anymore. Their careers are finished. Some of them, I think, are playing in Europe. Uh, let's anyway. It can have a major
Well, they
effect on
made
this thing.
they made a really bad decision. Whether she consented or didn't consent, uh, you should know. A little bell should go off in your head. This could backfire on me. As I've told you before, when I went to the Globe and Mail and I said, "What's our ethics program here? Like, what do we have to do?" And the editor of the day, Dick Doyle, said, "It's very simple. You can do anything you want, take anything you want, say anything you want, as long as you're comfortable with it being on the front page of the newspaper."
There you go. Well, lesson to everyone here: don't put it in the group chat if you don't want it on the front page of the paper.
Yeah, it's like
Don't
dumb, dumb, dumb
We don't
on
want our
all
judge to
sides.
read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the lesson for group chats, text messages writ large. So we'll be following that. So the complainant is going to be testifying. She brought her testimony. We've seen much of this already because we've seen videos from inside Jack's bar in London. We've seen videos from inside the room just of her recording. We've heard from other teammates where she's given her testimony up to the point where her and Michael McLeod left the bar. She's going to testify about the hotel portions of it tomorrow on Monday. So we'll be following that and come back with more of that next week when we're talking. So yeah, difficult case, a high profile one, but which we'll certainly be tracking. So Paul, we're just about the end of the hour here. I don't think we're going to get a chance to talk about the fisheries case, but anything else? We'll get to that next week because it's a great article by Aaron Beswick on the fisheries, the criminality, alleged criminality, but there's rights issues in the middle of it too. So I think that's deserves a little more time. Anything else you're watching at the moment, or looking to get some help on?
No, I mean, I'm still, as I said, I'm away. I'm going to be back in about 2 weeks. I start heading home next Sunday. I'll be in, I'm not sure, we're going to have to try to see if we can make the show next Sunday because I'm going to be in Tahiti, which is on the way home. And I'm not sure what our hookup is going to be there, but I am definitely going to try because we've never done a show from Tahiti yet.
We'll try it.
And
That's Mother's Day too next Sunday. Remind all our listeners.
yeah, and otherwise, I've got to go back to Toronto for more meetings about the upcoming book. Um, Things are going really, really well with it. Random House told me this week that they're nominating it to the Writers Trust as a Book of the Year. I
Wow,
think they get
that's
two
exciting.
nominations. So of all the books, nonfiction books, Random House publishes, mine is one of two or three that have been selected to for this honor, and so they like the book. I like the book. I think that when it comes out on June 10th, I think a lot of people are going to find it very interesting.
Can't wait for that day to happen. Well, that's great. So we'll look forward to that, and yeah, so we'll try to we'll coordinate for next weekend and work something out so that we can make sure we get a show in because there's going to be lots happening, I'm sure, between now and then.
Yep, and I'll
All
see you
right.
next week.
Okay, great, everyone.
Hopefully from Moorea,
All right. Well,
island off Tahiti.
sounds great. Okay, we'll talk to you then. Good week,
See
everyone.
you later.